Some family and friends waiting for news have vented their anger at airline officials. Others have kept a low profile. For some insight now into coping strategies, Dr. Kenneth Doka, Senior Consultant to the Hospice Foundation of America, joins me via Skype. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
People are obviously grief-stricken at what may have happened to their loved ones, but is this, if I could put it this way, unresolved grief made worse because of the lack of information? Should there be more communication?
I think whenever you have a traumatic event, people really are trying to construct a story of what happened. And even when situations are unknown, and I think it's important that the briefings sort of outrun the rumors, that people get up and say, well, we're investigating this, we're investigating that, we're investigating the other. I think open communication, I think shows of concern are really important to the survivors, to the family members.
Right, I think you said it right there, the unknown. And I suppose the ultimate question is, how does one explain the unknown?
Well, obviously one doesn't, and that can certainly be a complicating factor in grief. But I think the key right now is to keep people as informed as possible. You don't want people thinking that there's knowledge that's being held back. So a kind of honest approach to questions. I think inviting the media into the meetings gives people reassurance. Those are positive steps.
There's been a great deal of anger and pain, as we've been witnessing over the past few days. And to what extent has that been compounded by the fact that there have been so many conflicting reports? We hear reports it could be terrorism. We hear reports it could be a hijacking. We even hear reports that it could be pilot suicide.
Yeah, and again, I think when a death occurs, particularly a traumatic death, a sudden death, if it is a death, there's always a sense of trying to say, well, what happened and how did it happen and why did it happen and all those sort of unanswerable questions. And I think when there's no information and you really don't know what you're dealing with, you don't even really know if it's possible that people may have survived. You don't really know anything at this point in time. I think that adds to the confusion. We'd like to have a story. Even if it's a story that ends poorly, we at least like to know what happened. And of course, that's what's missing, and that's what's very complicating so far over this event.
Right, and in that search to find out what happened, I guess people's imaginations start running wild. They sort of wonder what really happened before that plane went down, if indeed it went down. Did it happen in a moment? Was there a struggle? Were people in a state of anxiety? Were people having, fear going through them? Did it take a long time?
Yeah, and I think that really is part of that narrative. What were people going through? Were there efforts to right the situation? Were people panicked for a long time, or was it a rather sudden loss that nobody expected? And until those are answered, it's very, very difficult for survivors to really cope with the loss. At this point, there's a kind of search for information.
Right, and you've been working in this field for a long time. There was something interesting that you've said, and that is people find it easier to cope if there's a heroic narrative attached to the story. And as you've just pointed out, even if it ended very tragically, but that helps if there is a heroic narrative. Just explain that to us.
Well, if you look at in the United States the event and the horror of 9/11, I think that when we look at the plane in Pennsylvania, where the men in the plane said, tried to take control of it again and had that heroic statement, "Let's roll." It makes people feel that at least there were efforts to do something. They weren't passive victims; they become heroes, and I think people would like to know what happened to that plane in Malaysia and what happened to the people and what their role was in it.
Dr. Kenneth Doka, Senior Consultant to the Hospice Foundation of America. Thanks for joining us, sir.